Wars like this don't begin in a single moment, and they don't end with a single decision. What exists instead is a fragile pause, one that can break at any time. Right now, the world's attention is fixed on a narrow stretch of water, the Strait of Hormuz, small in size, but critical in consequence, because what happens there doesn't stay there, and the choices being made around it may already be shaping the direction of a much larger conflict. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographic location. It is one of the most important arteries in the global system. Nearly 1/5 of the world's energy supply passes through this narrow passage. And when it becomes unstable, the effects are immediate. Not just for one country, but for the entire world. This is what makes the current situation so different. There are no formal declarations of war, no clear front lines, no single moment that defines when escalation truly began. Instead, the conflict unfolds in fragments, a limited strike, a controlled response, a round of negotiations that fails quietly. One day, there are signals of restraint. The next, tensions rise again. And over time, a pattern begins to emerge. Not of resolution, not of decisive victory, but of a prolonged stalemate. A condition where neither side fully advances, and neither side fully withdraws. And in a situation like this, the most dangerous factor is not the attack itself. It is the uncertainty that surrounds every decision that follows. As tensions rise around the Strait of Hormuz, the situation begins to move beyond observation and into action. The United States increases its naval presence. A blockade is introduced, not across the entire strait, but focused on restricting Iranian access. On paper, the objective is clear: apply pressure, limit Iran's ability to operate, force a strategic response. But the reality quickly becomes more complicated. Iran does not step back. Instead, it challenges the pressure. Ships attempt to pass. Some are intercepted. Some are seized. At the same time, uncertainty spreads across the waterway. Commercial vessels slow down. Some turn back. Others wait for clarity that never fully comes. And in that hesitation, the impact begins to expand. Oil prices react. Insurance costs increase. Global markets begin to shift. What started as a regional move is no longer contained within the region, because Hormuz is not just a passage, it is a pressure point for the entire global system. For years, the United States and its allies have relied on pressure as a primary tool. Sanctions, economic isolation, restrictions designed to weaken Iran over time. The assumption has always been the same. If the pressure is strong enough and sustained long enough, the system will eventually break. But Iran has not followed that pattern. Instead of collapse, there has been adaptation. Alternative trade routes, unconventional partnerships, systems that operate outside traditional channels. And over time, this adaptation changes the equation. Because once a system adapts, pressure no longer guarantees the same result. It may increase cost, it may slow activity, but it does not necessarily lead to failure. And this is where uncertainty begins to dominate. Because now, the United States is not only applying pressure to Iran, it is also managing the consequences of that pressure. On the global system, energy flows cannot simply stop. Markets do not wait for political clarity, and allies do not always move in the same direction. What was once a controlled strategy begins to produce unpredictable outcomes. Not a clear success, not a clear failure, but a condition where every action creates both effect and risk. At first glance, the pressure appears to be directed at Iran, but the effects do not stay there. Because when the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, the first impact is not always the intended one. It spreads outward, across Europe, where energy dependence remains high, across Asia, where supply disruptions are immediate, across global markets that react before certainty exists. This is the reversal. A strategy designed to isolate Iran begins to influence the entire system, and in some cases, the countries applying pressure must also absorb part of the consequences. Fuel prices rise, supply chains adjust, economic pressure becomes shared. This does not mean the strategy has failed, but it does mean the outcome is no longer controlled, because once the effects extend beyond the target, they become harder to contain. And once they are harder to contain, they become harder to predict. As the conflict extends beyond immediate actors, another layer begins to reshape the situation. Alliances. The United States continues to coordinate with NATO. On paper, the structure holds. Commitments remain in place. But beneath the surface, differences are becoming more visible. Some European countries hesitate, not because they reject the strategy entirely, but because the cost is no longer abstract. Energy security is directly affected. Economic stability becomes harder to maintain. And at the same time, another shift is quietly taking place. For years, sanctions have been the primary tool. Economic pressure, financial isolation. But the global system is no longer as one-directional as before. Some countries are beginning to explore alternatives. New payment systems, cross-block cooperation, trade channels that bypass traditional structures. Sanctions are still in place. They are still being used. But they no longer carry the same level of certainty. They apply pressure, but they do not guarantee outcomes. And this changes the dynamic. Because when pressure becomes less predictable, strategy becomes less controlled. At the same time, Israel continues its operations. Military pressure remains active. Even when de-escalation is discussed, actions on the ground do not fully stop. And as long as that continues, the system remains under tension, not collapsing, but no longer stable. At this stage, the situation presents no clear path forward. If the United States increases pressure, the risk of wider escalation grows. If it reduces pressure, its influence may weaken. Iran continues to adapt. Israel continues to act. Allies begin to diverge, and the Strait of Hormuz remains at the center of it all, not as a battlefield, but as a point where global consequences converge. This is no longer a question of who wins. It is a question of how far the system can stretch before something breaks. So the real decision is not simple. If you were in that position with no clear outcome and no safe option, would you move forward or would you step back? Let me know your answer.